Hello, everyone. Hi. Thank you for joining us today for our first webinar of 2026 about how to get started at Crossref. This is the introduction for the new Crossref members, and we're excited to kick in with all of you. We have already plenty of participants joined, so before we begin with our introduction, let me briefly cover the topics that we're going to discuss today. Today, we will share with you information about getting started and also cover the topics where we receive most of the questions from new members. We will look at the benefits and obligations of the membership, why metadata is important, what is the structure of DOIs, how to display them properly, what is reference linking, how to register the metadata records, how to update them, how do you pay for all of it, and if you're lost, how to get help. In the end, we will also have time for Q&A, so if you have any questions, please put them directly in the Q&A box, and we shall begin. If you have not used Zoom before, which I think over the past years, plenty of us had an opportunity to discover this tool, I'm just gonna give you a quick note here. As it's a webinar, we will not be able to enable cameras for all of us, for all of you. You can still react with different emojis, and then there is a Q&A box for your questions there. And you can also enable captions in this meeting, as well as translate it to your local language, so it is easier for you. This session is also going to be recorded, and we will share the recording afterwards. Who's here today? Hi, my name is Marina. I'm the Member Experience Manager at Crossref. I'm based in Vienna, Austria, and I'm excited to talk about your experience as our members today. Also here with us, Amanda Bartel. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name's Amanda. I'm the Director of Membership at Crossref. I'm based near to the city of Oxford in the UK, and happy to be here to talk to everybody today.
Thank you so much, Amanda. We're also very excited to have you here. And let's begin with talking about your membership journey. Not Amanda, but yours as a member. So on this point, I'm going to pass the stage over to Amanda for the first introduction. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thanks, Marina. So I'm hoping everybody on the call today is a fairly new Crossref member, and you should already have received some information from us about your membership journey. If we could go to the next slide. Thank you. So you should have received a welcome email, which will give you your new Crossref DOI prefix. And you should have had instructions for setting your password on your new Crossref credentials, which will enable you to register your records using your prefix. We've sent information to help you choose the correct content registration method, information about billing, voting, and how to interpret the reports you receive from us and how to get help. And those of you who've already been here for been members for a few weeks, you will have also received some follow-up emails with more information about these topics. So when you first applied to join Crossref and you filled in the application form, you ticked a box to accept the Crossref membership terms. And as a member, these terms mean that you have access to benefits, but also obligations to your fellow members and the wider community. So I'll start with the benefits of membership. So obviously, as a Crossref member, you can create a persistent identifier, a DOI, and a metadata record for each object that you publish. And you're able to connect your content through that metadata record with a growing global network of online scholarly research. Um, we currently have over 23,500 organizational members in 164 different countries who are all registering their metadata records and creating links between those records through reference linking and other methods. The information, the metadata that you provide to us gets then shared freely and openly through our APIs with the whole global scholarly ecosystem. We'll be talking a little bit later about where that information goes, but it really helps to improve the discoverability of your content. And you can find out other information through this metadata. You can find out who's citing your content or take part in other collaborative services such as cited by or similarity check. And you can also participate in our governance. We're governed by our board. Our board is made up of representatives from our member organisations. Any member can put somebody forward for a seat on our board, and all members vote for who should sit on our board. We also have a lot of working groups and advisory groups just to make sure that everything we're doing really benefits our members. So that's the benefits covered. There are also obligations for members as well. So as a member, you need to register DOIs and metadata records for everything that you publish going forward. This is not optional. You can't pick and choose your register DOIs for some articles, but not others. You really do need to register a DOI for everything that you publish. And it should only be for content that your organization is the publisher for. So, for example, if you are based at a university, you should only register DOIs for articles that are in journals that are published by your university. You should not register DOI records for articles in journals that are published by other organisations, even if one of your staff is the author. You only register DOI records for content that your organisation is the publisher for. Another important thing is you shouldn't register a new DOI for an item that already has a DOI. Once a DOI is registered for an item, it needs to remain the persistent identifier for that item forever. So if you perhaps acquire a journal from a different organisation and they already have articles with DOI records, you should not create new DOIs. You should continue to use and display the DOIs that the other organisation originally registered. But what we can do is mark you in our system as the new owner of that journal, and that means you'll be able to update the metadata for those existing DOIs. Even though those DOIs might not be on your prefix, that's still fine. And that means that DOI can remain persistent. When you register your DOIs and your metadata records with us, you'll give us what we call the resolution URL. So that's the web address that you'd like the readers to end up on if they paste that DOI link into a browser. They need to resolve to a unique landing page. So that would mean, for example, each article will need its own unique landing page. And you also need to have the DOI displayed on that landing page following our display guidelines. And Marina's going to talk a bit more about that later. You also need to undertake reference linking. So in your published articles, where you have your reference links at the end, add in DOIs where available. So if you have a reader reading the article, they want to find one of the referenced articles, they can just click on the DOI and easily find it. And we've got a link here. We'll send this slide deck afterwards so you can get more information about reference linking from our website. As a member, you also have an obligation to maintain and update your metadata records for the long term. And later on in the presentation, I'll be talking more about that. And finally, we need to make sure that everybody pays their invoices on time to help make sure that Crossref itself can remain persistent. So let's talk a bit about why metadata is so important. So you'll register with us a DOI for each item you publish and a metadata record about that item. And there's various things that you can register with us. There's the basic metadata. So, for example, if we're talking about an article, it would be the article title, the journal the article was published in, information about the contributors and their affiliations, so the authors and their ORCID IDs, and their institutions and the raw IDs, if you can access them. You might want to include funding information, an identifier for the funder, which should be a raw ID, or you might even have information about the individual grants. You might have grant numbers or even a grant DOI. And it's great to include relationships with other works, so links to other versions or translations, links through the references, links to the data that was outputted from the research. And finally, any updates, so corrections, retractions, withdrawals. So the metadata that you provide to us is stored in our XML, and it's then made available through our APIs. And we've got an example here of what a DOI record looks like when somebody accesses it through our API. Now, you don't need to worry too much about the XML or what this output looks like. I think most people on this call will be using helper tools to type in the metadata, and behind the scenes, our system will turn it into XML and output it through our API. But what is important is that this metadata is then stored in a consistent and machine readable way. So that means that systems and tools across the globe can then access your metadata really easily. And this metadata is used in hundreds of tools and by thousands of users. We get over 2 billion calls to our API every month. It's really heavily used. And it's used by all sorts of organizations and tools for all sorts of reasons. The image we're showing on the page now helps to communicate that. The outside ring shows the types of organizations that make use of our metadata. And the inside ring in grey shows what they use it for. So it's used by library discovery systems in institutions, use our metadata to help their researchers find content that they have access to. It's used by metrics and analytics organizations such as Scopus, Web of Science. DOAJ makes use of our metadata when they're reviewing journals. So it's used in lots of different places. And the more metadata you provide to us, the more likely it is that your content is going to be discovered by one of these downstream systems. Marina, I think I'm handing over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Amanda. Now let's talk about the structure of a DOI. We've all have been talking about registering the DOIs, the metadata of DOIs. DOI here stands for Digital Object Identifier, and this is exactly this persistent identifier that you can register with us at Crossref. So a lot of people also associate Crossref with DOIs. But it is important to understand and remember that Crossref is not just about the DOIs. So we are defined by how we support the academic community as a whole. It is also important to remember that DOIs are not an indicator of the quality of a publication or the organization that registers it, nor is it a mark of quality of the research submitted. A DOI is just a persistent link and identifier for the content item. So here we're going to look at the structure of the DOI. It is composed of three sections that we marked at three different colors. So the red part is the resolver address, and that makes each DOI not just an identifier, but also an actionable link, which means if you click on it, it's gonna lead you to a web page. The blue is prefix, which is assigned to every member when they join. And the yellow is a suffix, which is the part of the DOI assigned to the publisher and is unique to each content item. Let's take a quick look at each of the parts. So we have a prefix, and the prefix is unique for your account, unique for the member, and it's always going to start with a 10 dot and followed either by 4 or 5 digits. That just means that some earlier journals who joined Crossref years ago received a DOI with only 4 digits, but currently we are in the 5 digit DOI years. One prefix may be used to register all of the content for your organization. Even if you publish different types of content, like books and journals, or maybe you publish multiple journals, everything that is published under your organization, you can use this prefix to register DOIs. There is no limit to the number of DOIs you can create. Now there is a minimum number required. Then we also receive a lot of questions from new members about the suffix for their DOIs. And suffixes are best when they include short strings that are easily displayed and typed and are opaque, or so to say, random string of characters. It doesn't need to state anything about the item it is identifying. All of this is done within the metadata you register with us. I know it may be a bit tempting to use a pattern with something that humans can understand, but I do want to let you know that this is the best practice to have the suffix opaque. We also have a suffix generator tool that you can use to randomize characters to create your suffixes. Now, let's talk about how do we need to display the DOIs and what is the reference linking. The DOIs should be displayed exactly as you see it on the screen. So it should always be displayed as a full URL link and should not be preceded by dot and DOI or capital letters or low letters. It should be a link. We also recommend using the secure HTTPS rather than HTTP. And the reason for that is that a user should understand that it's not just an identifier, but it's also a link. And this display would encourage them to click on it, and then it resolves to the content. It will resolve actually to the landing page of the article that you have registered, and for that we also have specific guidelines. The user who clicks on the DOI needs to know where have they landed and what research object is that. So on the landing page, we would require you to show a full bibliographic citation. So the authors, the title, the abstract, the keywords, and then also this DOI displayed as a URL. So again, that they can cross-reference it maybe with their reference list and see that they are really on the correct page. And obviously there we would also ask you to have a button or anything that leads to a full text of this research object. Whether it's behind the paywall or no, it's up to each organization to decide. But this is an example of a good landing page. Now, just to compare, I'm going to show you an example of a not suitable landing page, and this is how it looks like. The problem is that there aren't unique URLs for each article. It's just one URL for the whole issue, and clicking on the DOI, you're not really sure where have you landed. We can also talk today about different ways to register your metadata records. Um, there are a lot of different ways. So we've created this small schema diagram, learning path, how to figure out what way do you need to register the content with us. So first and foremost, the most easy way, if you're using an OGS platform, you can use the specific OGS Crossref plugin that takes care of everything for you automatically. If you're not using an OGS platform, I would like to ask you, are you comfortable writing XML files? And if so, you can create those with the metadata and then either send it to us through HTTPS post or just upload them in the admin tool. If you're not comfortable, don't worry. We have a lot of helper tools to help you register content with us. So for most of our content like journal articles, books, chapters, reference works, and conference papers, we have this relatively old, I have admit, helper tool called Web Deposit Form. But I do want to encourage you, if you're just registering journal articles or maybe research grants, we have a new, better tool, which is also very user-friendly, and some might call it pretty, which was called last year Record Registration Form. But through a new year and new beginnings, you might find it in our documentation now as New Metadata Manager. So, just a quick overview of the main and most popular content registration methods. So, if you're using OJS, which is Open Journal System, you can use different plugins. And we know for those who are using OJS, there are many different versions, and sometimes the settings from a version to version differ. So for that, in our documentation, you will find step-by-step instructions and even tutorial videos. Currently, they're existing only for version 3.3 and 3.4, but we're actively working on recording the video for 3.5 as well, so you might expect it to go live on our website soon. The most common issue amongst new users with the plugin and OGS is the authentication. And just to let you know, when you become a Crossref member, you will receive a set of credentials. Those would be connected to your email address mostly, and this is what we call user credentials. Together with these user credentials, you will also receive in your welcome email a mention of a role. This is the role that you can use to register your content. And for that, you need to include it when setting up an OGS DOI plugin. You can see that I have this small error here that leads you to the format for your authentication. You use your email address, you use slash and your role, and then you put the password that you have previously set up for yourself. So most of our independent members will receive their user credentials with the roles. Although if you are a representative of a sponsored member organization, you will only have a role and a password, and your sponsor will share this information with you. I also want to mention, since we're on the topic of OJS, that there are several other plugins that you can use for reference linking, including funding data, for supporting the similarity check, or maybe you know it as Authenticate service, which is an additional paid service that you can subscribe to. And we've also linked here the documentation from PKP. Now, just to give you an overview of our brand new rebranded tool, which is called a new metadata manager. It's a really easy, user-friendly tool for you to submit your information for a journal article in as simple as a form. So you will go here, you will be asked to log in with the same credentials that you have. You'll click on New Record, and you will need to choose what is the record that you want to register, what is the type of the record. And then it's just going to be all in a really easy format for you to type in the information about your journal article. For example, like choose a DOI, enter the landing page, the authors and the affiliations. And then once done, it's going to show you a summary so you can check all of that. And you just hit this button submit, and it's going to convert all of this information and send it to us. So then it can be later available in our REST APIs and your DOI can be registered. You will also see a real-time verification there. If there is an error, it also gonna show you the error message, and I've linked here to our documentation where you can read what does each error mean. And for those of you who are not able or just you don't want to use any of these options, you can either use the web deposit form that allows also registration for more content types, or you can use the direct deposit of XML if you are willing to write an XML file and send it to us yourself. Now, when it comes to uh, updating the metadata records, I'm gonna pass to Amanda for further conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Marina. I was just busily answering all the great questions we're getting in the Q&A. For those of you who I've answered, apologies if some of my answers were a bit short. We got lots of questions and I want to make sure we're answering as much as possible. But yes, let's talk about updating existing metadata records. So the first time you register a DOI and a metadata record, there is a fee. You will be charged. But if you want to come back later and make an update to that metadata in that existing record, you won't be charged again. You can update the metadata in an existing record as many times as you want for free. And we really would encourage members to do that and keep those records up to date. And there's a few key reasons for doing that. Marina, if we could have the next slide. Thank you. So you want to keep your metadata records nice and clean. So, for example, you might identify an error. Maybe you had a typo in an author name, you misspelled their name. That information is going to feed down to all of those downstream systems. So you want to make sure you get it right and get it updated so it feeds correctly to those other systems. So you can just go back into that existing record, fix the name so it's spelled correctly, and then move on. You also want to make sure that your records are complete. Sometimes we add additional fields that members can use, or you as a member might start collecting extra information. So, for example, you might start collecting ORCID identifiers for your authors, and you might get some new ORCID IDs for authors who wrote older content. That's absolutely fine. You can go back into your older records and add that ORCID ID in. Or you might start collecting raw IDs for institutions or funding information. Whatever it is, you can always go back into your existing metadata records and add this extra information that you're getting. And finally, you want to keep that metadata up to date. Oh, if we just go back one, Marina, sorry. You're going to want to keep that metadata up to date as well. Things might change over time. So one of the biggest reasons things might change is if, let's say, you move your journal to a totally new website domain. That means the resolution URLs for all of your DOIs may well break. But that's fine. You can come back in and you can update just the resolution URL for each of your DOIs, making sure that that DOI continues working going forward. Or maybe there's an update to some of the work that you've published, or a retraction or a withdrawal. Again, you can update the metadata to reflect that change. And just as we said before, there are no fees to update the metadata on existing records, or we'd encourage you to do that as much as possible. So how do you update a metadata record? So there's a few different ways of doing it depending on your content registration method. If you want to update existing records one by one, so a good example there might be that author who has their name misspelled. If you're using OJS and the OJS plugins that Marina talked about earlier, you just go to the relevant article, unpublish, make your update, in this case, fix the spelling of the author name, save and republish. And that should push the update over to us as long as you're using the export import plugin. If you're using other helper tools, you'll need to redeposit the whole record with that missing or updated element. Some folks do send us XML files. In that case, you can resubmit with the missing element, and don't forget to update your timestamp. And I'll put a link in the slides here, which we'll send out after the meeting. So you'll be able to find more information about how to update those existing records one by one. You can also update existing records in bulk. So there are a few fields where you might get that extra information across lots and lots of your DOIs, and it doesn't make sense to make that update one by one. And instead, you want to make it in bulk. We have an option where you can upload a CSV using our web deposit form. It has to match a particular template. The template is available on our website on the link I've put there. And in that template, you have one column with each of the DOIs that need updating, and then another column with the piece of information, the piece of metadata that needs updating. You can only use that for certain fields: funding data, similarity check URLs, text and data mining, or license information. But it's really useful if you've got a lot of DOIs to change that information against. And finally, I talked earlier about what to do if you change your website domain. And you maybe have to update the resolution of all of your DOIs in one go. We can help you with that. Again, there's a template on our website for a text file where, again, you fill in one section with the DOIs and then another section with the new URLs if your URLs have changed. You do need to send that one to our support team. You can't upload it to our web deposit form, but we'll be able to therefore help you make that update in bulk. Okay, so we've given you more information about registering and updating content. I'm going to move on to some things which are more housekeeping and administration, I think. We often get questions about invoicing from new members, so we thought we'd talk a little bit about that today as well. So most Crossref members have two sets of fees that we send out to them. There's a membership fee and there are content registration fees. The annual membership invoice is sent out every January for the coming year. The content registration fees, these are sent out usually quarterly, and they're sent out after you've registered your DOIs. And the reason they're sent out afterwards is that we have different fees depending on the type of thing that you are registering, the type of content. So, journal articles, books, conference proceedings, peer reviews, preprints, there's all sorts of things you can register with us, and some of them have different fees. And there are also different fees depending on whether the item you're registering is current or back year. So, and obviously, we don't have that information until after you've registered the file with us. So, these invoices go out quarterly. You won't necessarily, though, receive an invoice every single quarter. If your invoice is under $100, we'll roll it on to the next quarter to avoid members having to pay lots and lots of smaller invoices. The invoice will give you lots of extra information. It'll tell you the prefix, the month the content was registered, the content type, and whether it's current or back year, which helps you tie that back to your own records. You can find your invoices anytime in our online payment portal, and you can also pay your invoices by credit card in that portal. If credit card payment isn't an option for you, there's also the option of bank transfers or checks from US-based banks. And unfortunately, we can only accept payment in US dollars. And finally, how to get help if you get stuck. Obviously, there's webinars like the ones we're running today, but day to day, we've got a few online resources to help you out. There's a members area on the website, which links you out to lots of useful information about being a member. We also have technical documentation, which gives a lot of step-by-step instructions for registering and updating your content, split down by the various content registration methods. We've got a community forum where you can publicly post questions and get answers from Crossref staff, Crossref ambassadors, or even fellow members who might have experienced the same issues that you have. You can contact our support team directly. If you go to crossref.org/contact, there'll be a form that you can fill out to explain the problem, and that will route you to the right contact at our end to help. If something changes about your account, and particularly if one of your key contacts changes, so somebody leaves the organisation or retires or what have you, do keep us up to date with that. And you can do that via that contact form as well. For those of you using OJS, PKP themselves have lots of useful documentation. So the final two links here are provided by PKP. Okay, so that's the end of, I guess, the formal part where we're giving you information. We wanted to leave plenty of time at the end for answering questions. I can see we got lots of questions in the Q&A and lots in the chat. We'll go through and answer those. I'm just wondering if there's any we should answer sort of publicly, verbally, that might be useful for everybody. I know I answered one earlier. Somebody was asking whether you can use your prefix to register, for example, both journals and conference proceedings that are published by the institution, which I think is useful for everyone to know. You can use your prefix to register anything that your organisation, your member organisation is publishing. So any journals that you publish, books, conference proceedings, you can use the DOI prefix that you've been given at the start to register all of those.
I see a very interesting question that I thought we could answer live.
Mm.
Ravi here is asking in the chat, what key metadata elements do you recommend journals must deposit in Crossref to maximize discoverability and citation linking, especially for small or non-institutional journals?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's obviously some metadata which you sort of have to provide, sort of the main bibliographic information. Things like the article title, for example, and the journal it's in. And then a lot of the other metadata, you can choose whether to add or not. A really, really important element is your references. You can actually give us your references as a metadata element, and that's probably the most useful thing you can do for citation linking, because that then goes into the metadata. Organizations can then see who you are citing, and then if other members are doing the same and they're referencing your published articles in their references, you can see how everything starts to get linked together well. So I would recommend always include your reference list in your metadata for each article. That's number one. Number two, we know we have a lot of folks who use our metadata, and the thing they always ask for is abstracts, because that really helps them work out what each article is about. So that tends to be if metadata has abstracts in there, it's likely to get used more by folks who are making use of our metadata in systems and tools, that sort of thing. Hopefully that was helpful.
Thank you so much, Amanda. We've also had a couple of questions about the ISSN, so maybe we want to tell everyone about the situation. Must a journal article always have ISSN in order to register a DOI for it?
Good question. So it's easiest if you do have an ISSN, because that helps to provide sort of an identifier for that journal itself. And it's a shared, well-known thing. If you don't have one yet, but you've applied and you're waiting for one, the easiest option is to wait until you have one and then start registering your records. Um, if you can't wait, you don't have to include an ISSN. There are other ways of doing that. You can actually register a DOI for your journal and have that as the unique identifier in the meantime. But then once you get your ISSN, you then have to come back and add it into all of your existing metadata records. So it just makes things a bit more complicated. So I'd recommend if you can wait until you've got an ISSN, it makes life easier, but you don't have to.
Thank you so much, Amanda. We have a question here from Karen. What if you uploaded metadata but received a report that the DOIs were not resolved?
Yes, that's a good question. So with most of the ways you register metadata with us, um, well, with all of the ways, you'll receive an update if it didn't register properly. So some of the options, like our new metadata manager, within the tool itself, you'll get an error message live if there was a problem. Some of the older methods, such as our older web deposit form, you get an email later, and in there it'll tell you there was a failure for some reason. And you'll always get an error message describing why there was a failure. There's actually, in a moment, I'll dig out the link. There's a page on our website which talks about each of those error messages and describes what the problem was and what you need to do to fix it. Some really common ones are things like you've maybe tried to register an article in a journal title, but we already have that journal title in our system associated with another member. Um, and that quite often happens maybe if you've taken on ownership of a journal from another institution. We can help transfer ownership there. We just need permission from the original member. So that one's usually fairly straightforward to sort out, but there might be all sorts of other reasons that you might get error messages.
Thank you. I've also just put the link
Oh, well
to
done.
our documentation in the chat.
Thank you, Marina. Yeah, so that latest link in chat, that'll explain the various error messages that you might receive.
Great. Another question here from Kate, and we've had, I think, and some other questions regarding the content type. Do graphical abstracts get to use the DOI as well, or just the main article? Kate is thinking that the graphical abstracts may be used on their own.
Yeah, that's a good question. We have uh, you can register records for components, something called components, which is probably the best option there. Um, Components need to be related to a parent article, but it sounds like in this instance it would be. Um, and the use case there would be if you've got an item that maybe is going to be cited on its own. So some members use that for figures sometimes from articles, that kind of thing. But I guess you could use it for a graphical abstract.
Thank you so much for your
Hmm.
answer, Amanda. Another question that I'm seeing in the chat, Kasun here from Sri Lanka is currently using the web deposit form and is wondering if there's a way to perform a bulk import, a bulk registration of the DOIs.
Oh, right. Oh, yes. Thank you. I think we were chatting in the Q&A earlier about this. There isn't using the web deposit form. Folks who send us, who submit XML files, there's a way to do that in bulk, but obviously that means you'd need to be able to create and write those XML files or have your own platform output the XML like OJS does. Um, so I think without those two things, if you are just using the web deposit form, there isn't currently a way to do that in bulk, unfortunately.
Thank you so much. We've been also having a couple of questions about is there a specific way how should Chinese journal be set up?
Oh, good question. I don't think so. It doesn't really make a difference where your item is published from. Like I said at the beginning, we've got members from 164 different countries now. Um, so no, I don't think that makes any difference particularly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I
Hmm.
think all of the journals would follow the same process for registering a DOI for them.
Mhm.
Another very interesting question to discuss with everyone. Mehmet is asking us, do we have a possibility to see who's using our DOIs? Some best practices by members of how they use the benefits as well. So there are actually two questions.
Yeah, so all members, we email out something called resolution reports each month, which goes to, I think, your primary contact and your
Yes,
technical contact. Do I have that right, Marina?
just the primary contact. But
Just
if
the
you wish
primary contact.
additional people to receive that, you can reach out to our support and we can set it up.
That's great, thank you. And so those resolution reports, they give you an idea of the number of times your DOIs have been clicked on. They also give you information about if you've got sort of broken DOIs as well. Um, it doesn't, you can't go down in on that information. It just gives you kind of top level figures, but it's quite, some members find it quite useful just to take a look at for an idea of scale. Um, the second part of the question was other members and how they're making use of the benefits.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so we've got a few case studies on the website from members talking about sort of the benefits they see from particularly improving their metadata quality. Um, I think again, we'll need to find the link, but there's a really good article from the Society of Microbiology who did a really good case study. They really f focused down on improving the quality of their metadata, and then they really saw an impact in terms of discoverability. It's always good to see when people have got actual sort of facts and figures. Again, I'll try and I'll dig those out and we can send that information out to, if we can't find it now, we'll send it to everybody afterwards.
Thank you so much, Amanda. We've also, I'm just kind of consolidating a couple of questions. We had questions on registering content or like journal articles in different languages
Mm.
and whether it's possible or whether there is a title that needs to be provided in original or English. What about the abstracts and all of these kind of things?
Yeah, so you can register your metadata in most languages, I believe. Um, what we would usually recommend is if you put the title into the metadata in the language in which it's most likely to be cited. So, for example, if it's most likely to be cited in English, put the title in English. If it's most likely to be cited in Bahasa Indonesian, put it in Bahasa Indonesian. So that's sort of a decision for you as the publisher to make. What do you think it's most likely to be cited in? And the reason I say that is when we then, in our metadata, create links so you can see through our cited by service who is citing you. It helps us make those links so we can see who's citing you if the languages match. Obviously, it's a lot harder to do that if the citation and the original title are in two different languages. That makes that matching up a lot harder.
Great. Thank you so much. We've also had a couple of questions about retracted papers.
Mm.
What do you do with the DOI when the paper has been retracted?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So obviously, it's part of the scholarly record that that article was published and then was retracted. So what you don't do is just remove the article from your website and never talk of it again. So you should make sure you've got a page on your website that explains that that title was retracted, and make sure the DOI resolves to that page. So people can no longer find the content, but they can find a notice just saying this item was retracted. You can also add something into the title in the Crossref metadata and maybe on the landing page to say withdrawn or retracted at the beginning. So it's super, super clear. We also have extra metadata that you can add using the crossmark part of our schema, which means you can give more granular information there. So you can give more information about why something was withdrawn or retracted, or even just updated. Obviously, it could just be that there was a significant update, but there's a new version available. And there's elements in the metadata that allow you to make that clear and also to add links between the page where the original version was and the updated newer version.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Now I'm just looking through some other questions. There some questions concerning the names.
Mm.
So whether there is Paul is asking they have a full name of authors and it's not always easy to split it into first and last name. And they're
Mm.
planning to register the entire name under surname, whether it's going to be any problem. And on the topic of surname, there's another question. If the surname changes, for example, due to a marriage, what's the best to continue?
Yeah, two interesting questions there. I think names are something I know we're looking at in our schema because the first name family name model isn't always helpful. And particularly in some countries, it's a lot more common to have authors with just a single name as well. So that is something that we're looking at. I believe currently surname is the only part of name that's mandated, um, which is problematic with people with just one name. That doesn't always fit. So yeah, that's something we're looking to improve. Where it's hard to split it, I don't know what the best recommendation would do. I would like to get advice from some colleagues on that and ask them what's the best way to split names. So we're, maybe if we can make a note of who asked that question, Marina, and we can go back with a better answer.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
then in terms of if somebody's name changes, um, again, it's probably worth thinking about citation matching. So if they were known by a particular name at the point at which they wrote this article, and somebody else is likely to cite it under that original name, from a pure metadata point of view, it makes sense to keep the original name so it can be matched properly. Um, but this is really an editorial decision for your organizations to make in discussion with your authors as well. There are some name changes authors might feel quite strongly about, and they might absolutely want you to change the name, which is fine, um, or they might be comfortable with it being left alone. So, from a pure metadata point of view, it's all about what's it likely to have been cited as. But obviously, outside of the world of metadata, it needs to be a conversation, an editorial decision between you and your authors.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I think as one of the wrap-up questions, I've seen somewhere a question about the various title transfers or prefix transfers. So Roshan
Mm,
here is asking that one of the journals has been receiving DOIs from a different DOI provider, which I would imagine it to be a different registration agency. And now when their organization is already a Crossref member, they wish to move that journal to their website and provide register the DOIs for that journal with Crossref.
yeah, yeah. So as you said, Marina, there's a couple of different um, options here. So it might be they were previously using a DOI prefix that belongs to another Crossref member, um, in which case, um, if that member is no longer using that prefix, we could potentially pick up that prefix and move it over to the new member. Um, or it might be that actually the DOI prefix isn't one that Crossref manages, in which case we'd need to have a conversation with the other registration agency to work out again if the person working with the other registration agency is no longer using that prefix, can we move it over to Crossref and give it to our new member or not? So it kind of depends on the specific example. If you drop in a message to our support team. And if you provide information about the prefix, we can have a discussion and work out the best next steps.
Great. Thank you so much for all of your replies, Amanda.
No
Um,
problem.
there's been an interesting question from Boyan here. How does Crossref metadata quality interact with DOAJ indexing requirements? If you know that.
Yeah, I don't know the deep detail. Some I know their indexing requirements are public on their website, I believe. And I know they do use our metadata, but I'm not sure exactly how that maps between their requirements and particular metadata elements. That's definitely a good question to ask. If you're going through that process with DOAJ at the moment, it's worth double checking that with them.
Thank you so much.
Mm.
Um, how can we ensure that in-text citations in our published article are properly linked to the cited paper's metadata in Crossref? What's the best practice for leveraging Crossref metadata to establish these connections?
Oh, interesting. So I would say definitely make sure you include your references in your metadata deposit. That's sort of the main thing to do. Um, you can um, our system can check to uh, make links between the references you deposit with us and any DOIs in our system. But you can also do this yourself and check it. We've got something called the STQ, simple text query, where you can paste in a list of references and it'll do make a match for you. So that's another way of doing it. I believe our new metadata manager also does that for you in its own interface as well, which is quite useful.
Thank you so much. I know there's so many questions in both Q&A and the chat. Unfortunately, we are out of time for today's session, so we will not be answering any more questions. Although I do encourage you to take a look at the slides that we're going to share with everyone afterwards, together with the recording of today's session. And then if you have any further questions afterwards, please feel free to contact our support team directly. I am just dropping the link in the chat right now, and then just include as much information as possible about your request. And please give our team a little bit of time to get back to you. And yeah, also, if you have any feedback about today's session, do let us know. And welcome to Crossref. Thank you very much.